So it's been a while since I've posted any videos, and I've been working on a bunch of different projects. But what I wanted to do with this is I wanted to make kind of like an addendum to the Dutone series, because originally that was intended to be a tricolor cyanotype, and I could never get it right until I figured out that process. So the idea behind this video is to show you the additional step required to make a tricolor cyanotype, but everything in the Dutone series is relevant and required to be able to do this, and will be referenced in this video. So here are the first two successful tricolors I made, and I wanted to show here are the two original photos as well, so we can, the first thing we have to go over is same as with the last one, is the subject matter is really important, because this tricolor and the Dutone process are such a muted color palette just because of the process, and there's nothing you can do about it. The photo you pick for these processes, A, needs to be very vibrant, and B/C, however you want to look at it, it needs to have like some contrasting colors. Otherwise, it's not really going to have any, there's not going to be any reason to go through this trouble if you cannot separate them out to where you can see them distinctly. So again, this is what they look like before and after, so you can see why it's so important that you pick those colors, or pick a bright and contrasty image to be able to use this process in the first place. So now that we've picked our subject, we're going to make the negatives. We're going to do that in GIMP. I happen to be using Ubuntu Linux, but it'll work in any operating system. So I made a folder on the desktop called negatives, and I put the image we're going to be using in here. So let's open up GIMP, and then we're going to go File, Open, navigate to the desktop, Negatives, and then the image you want. Now that the image is open, the first thing we have to do is go to Colors, Hue and Saturation. Bring the saturation all the way up. Click OK. Then go to Image, Transform, and Flip horizontally. That's because you're going to be making a negative image. Then you want to go to Colors. Let's see, Components, and Decompose. Make sure RGB is selected and click OK. Alright, so we now have our three layers, red, green, and blue, and now I'm going to show you how to adjust and export each one as our three negatives. So we're going to start with the red layer, which is the cyan layer. Make sure it is selected or highlighted here. Go to Colors and Invert. Then go to Colors, Brightness and Contrast, brightness all the way up, click OK. Then Colors, Exposure, Black Level all the way up. We only have to do this for this layer, and it has something to do with the cyan layer and the dilution of it or something. I'm not exactly 100% sure what's going on there, but this is the only layer you have to do this with. But click OK. Now that one is ready, so we're going to go File, Export, and we're going to see make sure you navigate to the folder you want to save it as, otherwise you're not going to remember where it is. And we're going to name this we're just going to name it Cyan, so Cyan, and then click Export. And make sure that the compression level is 0 so that you get the 100% no distortion or any of that. And then click Export, and you should have your cyan negative ready to go. Now that you have your cyan negative, you want to uncheck this little eye icon, because that's going to show you the next one down. Make sure it is selected. If you have that one selected, then nothing's going to happen. You have to select the one you want. Colors, Invert, colors, brightness and contrast, brightness all the way up. Click OK. Now, File, Export as, and we're going to name this one Magenta because this is the magenta layer. Make sure it's in the folder you want. Click Export. Make sure the compression is 0 and then click Export. And you should have the magenta negative in the folder. Now finally, uncheck that icon on the green layer so that the blue layer is selected. Colors, invert, colors, brightness and contrast, brightness all the way up. Click OK. File, Export as, and then this is the yellow layer. Click Export. Make sure it's on 0 compression and export. These are saved as PNG files and they're really high quality. I'm just leaving it that way because they're going to be the most accurate. Make sure you have all your, you're going to have your negative, of course your positive, but your 3 negatives, and then they are ready to print. Now, I am not going into how to add a border, registration marks, or any of that. That's all the same as in the previous videos. You can do it that way. If you prefer, you can just print them and do a mechanical registration, so I'm not going to go into that. But so at this point, you've made your negatives. You're going to print them. I'm not going into that, and then we'll go straight on to exactly what steps are next to make the tricolor. Now, the first layer is the key to all of this because the first layer is the toned layer, and it has to be just because of the nature of this process. You have to tone the first layer or nothing will work. So that is the important step in this. Now, you can use a variety of toners. You can look online. There's all kinds of stuff from wine tannin to, green tea, etc. But the reason I'm using tannic acid is it's a pure form and it eliminates any issues with variations so that I don't have to worry about that as part of the variables I'm working with here. The second and third layer are so the second layer is just a overexposed and bleached layer, and the third layer is just a dilute layer, normal cyanotype. So those 2 layers you can't do anything with. The only control you really have other than exposure and how light and dark they are is the first layer and how accurate it is to the color palette you're looking for. So it really is the key to everything, and that's the one you have to get right to begin with. Now that you have printed your negatives, the next step is, again, following the previous video, you are going to prep your paper. So essentially, and again, this is just a recap, we're not going into every single step. You're going to shrink the paper, you're going to coat the paper and let it dry, and then it's ready for exposure. Now the first layer is identical to the Duotone series. It is the 1010 formula mentioned in that series, and I'll have the formula up here on the screen so you can see it. You are then going, after the paper is coated and dried with that formula, you're going to register your negative, and using the exact same components from the previous video, again yours will be different, so time will be different. It was exposed for 35 minutes using that 85 watt, or I'm sorry, the 80 watt UV lamp. After exposure, you're going to develop the print, put it in water essentially, wash it, rinse it well. You're then going to bleach the print. You can do this right after exposure. You don't have to wait. All of these steps can be done all at the same time. You're going to develop it, rinse it, bleach it, wash it again. Then you're going to tone it. Again, you can do some of these steps later on, but I'm just recapping because all this is in the previous video. You're going to tone the print. You're going to wash it thoroughly so that there's no toning there's none of that chemical in the paper, otherwise it'll stain. Then you're going to dry it. Now, at the step of drying on the first layer, on the magenta layer, the first layer is always the magenta layer, just remember that. Once you have done the exposure, the bleaching, the toning, washing, rinsing, and drying, you can put that away and do the second and third layers whenever you want. That first layer is the most complicated, so if you decide you want to do a bunch of different tricolor cyanotypes, then make a whole bunch of them, do all of these steps, let them dry, and then you can put them away for another day. So again, this is a recap, but this is the exact same steps as layer 1 on the Duotone series. Now I also wanted to show what the differences, how they look. So this is here is a series of pictures of the tricolor tests I did. These are all of the different images just exposed and developed. So I did these in stages just so I could show pictures of what the different stages look like. So these are all of the images just exposed, developed, and dried. Then this is what all of the same images look like at the bleached stage. So they have this light, kind of a lemon yellow color, but this is all of the same images at the bleached stage. And finally, this is what all of the images look like after toning and drying. So I wanted to show what each step looked like, because it's a little hard to tell on video. I wanted to have scans of them. So that is what every step of the process looks like, separated out so you can see it. Okay, so the only, or I should say the major difference between a duotone and a tricolor is there are 3 layers, tricolor. So the next step is the one that's missing from the original Duotone series, and that is the yellow layer. So you're going to coat the paper with the exact same 10-10 formula from the first layer, and I'm going to pop that up on the screen again. So you're going to coat it with that same layer, that same 10-10 formula. Now, this still follows the logic of the first series, where you have to be careful when you apply a layer of the chemical over an already exposed and toned layer, because it affects it. So when you get to this stage, you need to do everything as you can, as soon as possible, because the longer they interact with each other, the longer they can, the worse the tone comes out, because it interacts with the layer in kind of a negative way. The best way to look at this is, you coat the paper, let it sit flat. I show all this in the previous videos, but just so you know, on this layer, same as the second layer on the first video, you coat it, don't overcoat it, lay it flat for it to absorb. Then you need to hold it, you lay it flat till it's no longer like really shiny. Then you need to kind of like hold it in front of a fan, or you can use a hairdryer, but it has to be set to cold, do not use hot. Then I would dry it with a fan on it. Here is an image I'll show you of a test I did where I coated it. I didn't expose it at all. I just coated it, let it dry, then washed it, and you can see where it's coated is slightly, I won't say bleached, but the tones are slightly different. So you want to do this as quickly as possible to mitigate that. Alright, now the next trick to this layer is you have to overexpose it. So whatever you expose the first layer for, you have to expose this layer about 2 to 3 times. So I did 2.5 times, so 87 minutes I believe this one was, in order to get it a little overexposed. And then once it's exposed, you take it out, you develop it, rinse it very, very well. You always want to rinse it as well as you can, otherwise you get more staining. Then you need to bleach it completely. So bleach it completely, and that is that layer. You'll bleach it and let it dry, and this is what the image looks like on its own, and this is what it looks like with the second layer together. Okay, so this is the critical step to making the tricolor, and it's the additional step in that goes with the other video series to be able to achieve the tricolor look. So you will follow all these steps and let it dry, and then you are ready to do the third and final layer to do the tricolor cyanotype. So the third and final layer is identical to the Dutone series. You'll use a diluted 10-10 mixture. So you take the 10-10 mixture and dilute it in half, and I'll put that up on the screen for you. But it's identical to the final layer of the last series. Again, coat it. Do not overcoat it. Let it sit till it's not as shiny. Let it dry it with a cool source if possible, and then dry it with a fan. Now, this layer you'll expose about the same amount of time as the very first layer. The second layer is the only one you overexpose. So the third layer, expose the same as the first layer. Then develop it as normal in water, rinse it, and let it dry. And then you can see here the final result. I also wanted to show what each layer looks like respectively separated, just so you can kind of get an idea of it, and that's what these images right here are. So here are the three final images. Just wanted to show up on the screen here. All of the articles I have made for this are on the Alternative Photography website, and I'll put them in links down below. And I plan on making this into a more detailed article, just because it's getting a little complicated to make videos as long as I've been making. So that's it for this one, and I'll see you in the next.